Good morning. My name is Frances Shannon, Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research here at the University of Canberra, standing in for Professor Stephen Parker, who is the Vice-Chancellor of the University. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
A wild and woolly morning in Canberra again, but this week the inquiry into asylum seeker children in detention centres has heard allegations of mental health and other problems of children on Christmas Island. Is it likely that this inquiry will change the government's attitude and its policy?
I don't think it'll change its basic policy. The government is determined to be as tough as possible. However, within that framework, it will put pressure on the government to get children out of this sort of detention into the community as quickly as possible. The number of children in detention has been falling over the past few months, but nevertheless a substantial number still remain on Christmas Island, and that will be, I think, expedited, or their removal to the community will probably be expedited over the next period, because the government really is under a lot of criticism to do something about this. However, I think that something that we saw out of the evidence that was given this week to the Human Rights Commission inquiry into children in detention was just how bad the facilities are for children and how little transparency there is about this situation.
The government has released its plans this week for work for the dole, including the requirement for job seekers to apply for at least 40 jobs a month. Is this a case of rhetoric over logic?
I think it's a very impractical requirement, because it does mean that a lot of these applications would be very pro forma, that the people either wouldn't be qualified for the jobs, or they would be reeling off the applications without a lot of consideration to the detail. They wouldn't really be pushing their case as much as was needed to get the job. Business is complaining, especially small business, that you could find that businesses were overwhelmed with applications that were really pretty irrelevant to their needs, and that this was more red tape when the government is committed to less red tape. So I think it reflects on the government's part a rather punitive attitude to the unemployed, especially to the young unemployed, rather than honing the policy more finely to what is likely to achieve the best results. In a way, it's the same with work for the dole. The principle of having people engaged is fair enough, but to have 25 hours a week for people under 30 is quite a big burden when they're also supposed to be out looking for the jobs.
This will be interesting to see how it plays out.
It is an exposure document, so there will be feedback from industry, from welfare groups and so on. So we might see changes, probably will see changes before the final model is unveiled.
Going internationally now, the MH17 tragedy is still dominating the news cycle, with Julie Bishop still in Ukraine, and issues about access to the site still ongoing. Why didn't the Australian government follow the US and the EU and apply sanctions on Russia?
I think the main reason was that the government decided that the best way to get cooperation to get to the site would be to not toughen its sanctions. It has minimalist sanctions at the moment, for example, affecting the travel of designated people, but it certainly has not gone and doesn't propose to go to this higher level of sanctions which the EU and America have imposed. Whether the judgment that that's the best way to get cooperation, or whether the cooperation would come without it, is not all that clear, but nevertheless that's the judgment that Tony Abbott has taken. Now, of course, this does put him somewhat at odds with his own initial rhetoric, which was so tough on the Russians. He has softened that rhetoric through a number of stages since the beginning of this matter, but his emphasis now is totally on retrieving any remains that are still on the site, and he's putting that above all else and above gestures like sanctions.
And do you think they are moving towards getting the right level of cooperation for access to the site and to move in that direction?
They seem to be getting some more cooperation, and the Ukrainian Parliament has passed a resolution that allows armed police to go into the site. Before it was unarmed police only. But of course the fact that the fighting is going on means that it's a dangerous operation, and even if you get a brief ceasefire, it's still a very hazardous procedure to get to the site, search for the remains and so on.
Finally, the government seems to be running into more trouble with Clive Palmer and the Palmer United Party, saying that he should be respecting their mandate on the mining tax. Is Clive just making trouble here, or is he likely to have any real chance of stopping the repeal of the mining tax?
Well, he's of course attacking a number of budget measures, and on the mining tax he favours the repeal of the tax, but he does not favour various measures being repealed that were associated with it. They were supposed to be paid for out of it, but of course it raises hardly any money, so they're not being paid for it from that source. But measures like the kids' bonus and help for superannuation for low income earners, he says, no, we won't repeal that as the government wishes. So this was at an impasse when the Senate met in its first session, the new Senate, and whether it will remain at an impasse we'll see when the Parliament reconvenes at the end of August. But as things stand, there's no sign of a breakthrough on that, which would mean that the mining tax would not be repealed because of the link.
Thank you, Michelle, and next week Stephen Parker will be back in the chair.
Thanks very much.